Welcome back, everyone. We're glad to have you with us here. When the topic is aliens, let's be honest, it just wouldn't feel right to leave out Area 51, the most secretive slice of desert in America. So, what do you believe is hidden inside? Is it simply a high-security test site? Or the ultimate vault for something not of this earth? You decide. Share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's step into America's most famous secret. Chapter 1. The Desert That Holds Secrets Area 51. You've heard the name. You've seen it in movies, read it in headlines, heard it whispered in conspiracy circles. Say the words, and most people think of one thing: aliens, flying saucers, government secrets buried deep beneath the sand. But what if I told you the truth is even stranger than the stories? Like every story, this one begins with a place. Why did the U.S. government choose Groom Lake, Nevada, Area 51, as one of its most restricted and heavily guarded locations on Earth? On the map, it's nothing more than a pale, dry scar in the middle of nowhere. But standing there on the ground, Groom Lake is surrounded by fences for miles, guarded by armed patrols, watching from distant ridgelines, and shielded by a no-fly zone where nothing can pass without strict military clearance. To some, it's the safest airbase in the country. To others, it's the perfect hiding spot for tech that didn't originate on this planet. Groom Lake lies at the very heart of Area 51. It isn't really a lake anymore. It hasn't been for thousands of years. Today, it's a vast dried-out basin, over 3.5 miles across, its pale clay surface reflecting sunlight by day and seeming to softly glow beneath the moon at night. The terrain is naturally flat and firm, perfect for landing in any direction. For ordinary aircraft, that's a key advantage. But for something not so ordinary, something with unusual shape, size, or behavior in the air, it's ideal. That's the first reason Groom Lake is so deeply woven into alien rumors. You could land almost anything here. A disk the size of a passenger jet, a wingless hovering craft moving without sound, or something so delicate it couldn't land on a regular tarmac at all. The lakebed could handle them all, and the terrain around it would keep them hidden. Mountains encircle the region like natural barriers. From nearly every angle, the layout blocks any clear view. And the rare high ground that does exist? It's far away and constantly monitored. Anyone who hangs around too long is quickly approached by security patrols. Between the ridge lines and the base lies an open desert. No trees, no hiding places. Anyone approaching is visible from miles out. Above Groom Lake, the skies are even more tightly restricted. The airspace known as R4808 North is completely off limits except for approved military aircraft. Civilian pilots who get too close are immediately warned and at times escorted out. No sky-based camera will ever catch what enters or leaves the lakebed. The rule is clear. If it's flying over Groom Lake, there's a reason, and you're not supposed to witness it. Other testing grounds exist across the U.S., but none as sealed off as this. And for those who believe in the alien narrative, this is the part that sticks. If the government truly recovered something spectacular, a vehicle from another world, there are only a few locations secure enough to test and store it without being exposed. Groom Lake fits the bill. Immense space, natural seclusion, and surroundings custom fit to manage massive or strange objects. And it's not just the dry lake. Over time, The edge of the base has expanded with hangars large enough to hide commercial airliners, and some built straight into the surrounding hills. Roads cross the lake bed to places that seem to stop without warning. Theories suggest these paths descend underground to concealed hangars or rooms buried beneath the desert floor. If true, this would allow vehicles to be moved without ever being seen by open skies. Even in military circles, Groom Lake operates on rigid compartmentalization. Each day, employees fly in from Las Vegas aboard anonymous aircraft. They're restricted to specific zones and given just enough info to perform their task. So if alien tech did exist here, only a small group would have access, while everyone else worked around them unknowingly. Its known past only fuels the mystery. Back in the 1950s and 60s, the CIA selected Groom Lake to test the U-2 spy plane, capable of flying higher than any other aircraft. Later came the A-12 Ox Cart, which could exceed Mach 3. Both remained off the radar for years, and both looked nothing like anything commercial. If such black projects could be hidden for decades, many wonder, why not something even more advanced, possibly extraterrestrial? It's this gray zone between what's real and what's rumored where Groom Lake's alien legend thrives. The site already has a documented history of sheltering planes far ahead of their time. So it makes sense to the believers that if something truly non-human were recovered, it would be sent here. By the 2000s, satellite footage revealed clear expansion, new shelters, lengthened runways, markings on the clay bed that hinted at repeated irregular activity. With every new development, the speculation intensifies. Was the bigger hangar made for a larger ship? Was the extended runway designed for something with a flight path far from ordinary? The same qualities that make Groom Lake so heavily secured also make it fascinating in the alien conversation. Other air bases can be viewed from nearby hills, but not this one. Other facilities share airspace with civilian paths, but not here. Other sites offer partial visibility to the public, but Groom Lake doesn't. Its secrecy is absolute, and it's woven into the landscape itself. Extreme protection often means there's something equally extreme to hide. For the military, that might be a future weapon system, decades ahead of its time. For believers, it's possibly technology that didn't come from humans at all. Either way, Groom Lake is unbeatable when it comes to hiding something, whether it's a Black Project prototype or a craft from beyond Earth. From the closest legal vantage point, the lakebed appears silent and lifeless. The buildings look tiny against the sprawling white terrain, but that quiet presence is intentional. Absolutely nothing out here is left exposed by chance, and anything significant vanishes long before anyone gets close. And yet, in the late 1980s, one man claimed he'd seen behind the locked doors. Not just Groom Lake, but another installation hidden nearby. A facility, he claimed, where the U.S. government was analyzing technology that didn't originate from Earth. His story would spark one of the most talked about and polarizing alien accounts ever tied to Area 51. Chapter 2. Bob Lazar and the S4 Story. By the time the 1980s wound down, Area 51's identity as a secret military test zone was already cemented. Groom Lake's airstrips and hangars had hosted some of the most elite reconnaissance planes ever conceived, all outside public awareness. But then, in November 1989, a new claim surfaced, one that pushed the narrative away from above top-secret aircraft, and directly into alien territory. It came from a man named Bob Lazar. According to Lazar, the real centerpiece of Area 51 wasn't Groom Lake at all. It was a smaller, more classified base located several miles south at a dry patch of land known as Papoose Lake. Lazar called this location S4. He claimed there was a row of hangars carved directly into the mountainside, with doors slanted to follow the natural slope, making them impossible to spot from above, and the access was just as hidden. You didn't stroll from Area 51 down to S4. According to him, employees were flown daily into Groom Lake, packed onto shuttles with blacked-out windows, and only then taken underground. Even within one of the most protected zones in the U.S., S4 stood in a category of secrecy all its own. What Lazar said he witnessed there had no comparison, not even inside Groom Lake itself. According to his account, S4 housed 9 flying vehicles, each of unknown origin. Some were damaged, some were fully intact, but all of them, Lazar insisted, were not created by human hands. The specific craft he worked on was small and disc-shaped, something he referred to as the sports model. Its exterior had no seams, no bolts, no weld lines. Inside, the cabin was tight and cramped, with small child-sized seats and smooth curved surfaces. Nothing inside it looked anything like a conventional cockpit. His job, he said, was focused on the propulsion system. At the center of it all was a reactor, powered by something science had never seen, element 115. Lazar claimed it could generate its own gravitational field, bending the very fabric of space-time to travel without wings, engines, or rotors. As he described it, the craft didn't accelerate to go faster. It folded space to bring its target closer. To believers, the existence of S4 made total sense within the Area 51 narrative. Groom Lake was for flight testing. S4 was the vault, where these objects were housed and dissected. The rugged terrain around Papoose Lake concealed hangars from open view, and even spy satellites would struggle to spot signs of activity. In this case, the land itself became a layer of security. Lazar described the protection at S4 as unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Armed guards were stationed along every hallway. ID passes were scanned at every entrance point, and everything was compartmentalized. Access was granted only on a need-to-know basis. Lazar only saw what his role required, but even that, he claimed, was enough to convince him the craft wasn't manufactured on Earth. Part of his story included reading technical briefings, reports that outlined more than one recovered vehicle. Some were supposedly ancient, found buried in unknown locations. Others had been retrieved from more recent downed events. But all, according to those papers, had been transferred to S4 for reverse engineering work, an attempt to replicate alien systems with human tech. Before 1989, the secrecy around Area 51 mostly revolved around spy aircraft like the U-2 and the A-12 Oxcart. After Lazar came forward, everything changed. Area 51, in the public mind, transformed from a test base to the heart of an alien technology cover-up. Skeptics reacted quickly, calling Lazar's credibility into question. Education and employment records connected to his claims vanished, or couldn't be verified. Critics said that without real photos, documents, or tangible proof, his story was just another wild tale. And yet, even some of those skeptics admitted He knew specific details about the facility's layout and security that were later confirmed. One of the most debated parts of Lazar's account dealt with test flights. He claimed to know the schedule when specific craft were airborne and even brought friends to a ridge just outside the restricted zone to watch. On several nights, they reported bright lights darting across the sky, executing sharp turns and abrupt accelerations over the desert, movements that defied the capabilities of known aircraft. Eventually, Lazar said, security discovered these secret viewings, and he was dismissed from the program. But the part of his story that's lasted the longest, Element 115. When he first mentioned it, the element hadn't yet been discovered. It existed only as scientific theory. Then in 2003, researchers synthesized a new atomic element, moscovium, also known as element 115, but it was unstable, decaying in less than a second. Supporters argue that doesn't disprove anything. Lazar had described a stable isotope that may occur naturally. Skeptics point to the instability as final proof. It could never be used as a power source. The debate is still unresolved. Whatever the truth, Lazar's tale breathed new life into the Area 51 mystery. He gave craft counts, facility layouts, and propulsion theories, claims that could be debated, researched, and repeated. He also introduced the layered secrecy model, Groom Lake for experimental operations, S4 for the hidden treasures. Look at today's satellite images of Papoose Lake, and you'll see nothing unusual, just a cracked lake bed and jagged hills. For believers, that's the point. It means the camouflage works. For critics, it only confirms there's nothing there. But either way, the lack of proof has only kept the fascination growing. Over 3 decades later, Lazar stands by every word. He still claims he worked with alien vehicles. That S4 exists. That the U.S. government is in possession of machines built by non-human hands. To many, he's a whistleblower who risked it all to share a hidden truth. To others, he's the architect of the most persistent UFO legend in modern memory. But regardless of where you land, his story changed how the world saw Area 51. Because it said one thing clearly. Even within the most classified facility on Earth, there could be another level, a deeper one, that truly matters. And if S4 is real, then somewhere behind the mountains of Papoose Lake, concealed within Area 51's electric fences, are the very ships Lazar described. Chapter 3. Alien Craft Hidden Inside Area 51. Imagine entering a hangar so enormous, your footsteps echo and vanish in the cool, low-lit space. Ahead, covered in thick tarps, are shapes that don't resemble anything that should be flying. Stretched discs with no seams. Long tube-like structures as smooth as casted glass. And razor-shaped triangles, designed more for slicing through space than air. This is the image that's taken shape over decades, through rumors, scattered leaks, and pieces of testimony. The idea is simple, but massive. Inside Area 51's most restricted hangars are craft that were not built on this planet. The hangars themselves are a blend of visible buildings and, if eyewitness accounts hold true, vaulted chambers buried deep beneath the desert floor. From satellite views, you can spot the sprawling surface infrastructure. What you can't see and what drives constant speculation are the underground networks said to stretch far beyond what's visible above. Details vary between accounts, but the tone rarely does. Some speak of small, compact-sized craft, metallic yet strangely light, with surfaces that bend and scatter light like something alive. Others recall massive, cigar-shaped vessels the size of commercial jets, resting in silence inside cavernous, dimly lit bays. More in-depth stories include features that defy conventional expectations, seating too small for adult humans, control panels with no switches or manual interfaces, and windows that cloud over or become see-through with the wave of a hand. As for where these craft are being held, that depends on who you ask. Some investigators point to the southern fringe of Groom Lake, close to main runways, ideal for discreet testing. Others say the true vaults are hidden away, carved into nearby hills or sealed beneath the hard desert basin. But no matter the location, the theories agree on one critical point. Access is extremely limited. Only a tiny fraction of base personnel are allowed near these projects. Every layer is controlled, biometric scans, multiple security checks, armed guards, compartmentalized so even insiders see only what their clearance allows. A handful of reports go even further. They claim that certain hangar doors are engineered right into the ridgelines, with outer panels shaped and textured to match the surrounding rock. When sealed, they're indistinguishable from the hillside, impossible to detect even up close. In the Nevada desert, where natural camouflage is scarce, hiding things comes down to design, not foliage. Concealment here isn't just about the view from the ground. It's about staying invisible from satellites and high-altitude surveillance aircraft. And remember, not everything hidden at Area 51 is assumed to be alien. Its verified legacy includes programs like the A-12 Oxcart, the F-117 Nighthawk, and other next-gen prototypes that were decades ahead of the curve. Those aircraft were protected just like the rumored non-human ones, stored in isolated bays, transported beneath covers, and flown only under darkness. For skeptics, that history says it all. But for those with alleged first-hand experience, there's a boundary where shape, construction, and physics no longer align with anything man-made. One former technician shared a moment from the late 1990s. He said he entered the wrong hangar and saw a metallic disc roughly 30 feet in diameter, balanced on low stands. Its surface had no bolts, no joints, no hardware. Sections of its hull were detached and displayed on raised workstations, with researchers in clean suits studying the material under high-intensity lights. No engines, no wiring, at least nothing that looked familiar. Within minutes, he was pulled aside, sharply informed he'd entered the wrong sector. A civilian truck driver, contracted to deliver specialized parts to the base, recalled backing up near a bay hidden behind towering partitions. Still, he managed a glimpse, covered shapes in the shadows, smoother and more symmetrical than anything he'd hauled in 3 decades. The curves were too perfect, too precise, as if they'd been molded in a single piece without assembly. Some researchers point to the sheer size of select hangars as another clue. Satellite scans reveal buildings with footprints far beyond what's required for modern jets or even next-gen bombers, big enough to accommodate vehicles with massive wingspans or substantial bulk. Skeptics suggest they might house radar systems or drone platforms. Believers argue the opposite. The scale is intentional, built for something aviation hasn't seen yet. And then there's the underground narrative. Stories of deep vaults beneath Area 51 have circulated since the 1980s, fueled by self-described insiders, speculative schematics, and even seismic scans that show signs of massive voids beneath the desert. In this version, surface hangars are just the entry points. Below them, entire sublevels, storage bays, labs, mechanical facilities, interlinked by tunnels so wide they could accommodate semis or even rail lines. Such a layout would make it possible to move craft between sites without ever risking a sighting under open sky. Security underground, according to repeatedly told accounts, is total. Personnel are electronically tracked. Escorts shadow every movement. Zone-specific access ensures no one travels alone or out of place. If a craft is being analyzed, only a handful, maybe 10 people, might ever be allowed near it. Even maintenance crews, some suggest, are briefed on short notice, escorted to the site, and escorted right back out. No lingering, no questions. And much of what escapes to the outside world comes by accident. A split-second glance through an open doorway, a half-heard conversation in a cafeteria, or a glint of something odd from a perch miles away across a ridge. Over the years, a small group of former workers and transient witnesses have held onto those moments, describing them years later in cautious interviews. Some hide their identities, others speak openly. The skeptical view hasn't changed. These strange forms, the heavy security, that's what advanced military R&D projects look like. Sharp angles may just be stealth prototypes. Disc-shaped bodies could be experimental airframes designed to push aerodynamic boundaries, and deep underground facilities. Those are commonplace for climate-sensitive equipment or protection from spy satellites. But even among seasoned personnel, those who've worked within black projects, there are whispers, accounts of objects that don't add up, craft with no exhaust systems, no intakes, no visible control mechanisms, outer layers that shimmer slightly under the light, like the material surface isn't constant, and dimensions, pilot areas, cabin shapes that don't seem built for any human crew. History supports both lenses. During the Cold War, planes like the U-2 and the A-12 were kept here under total secrecy, years before the public knew they existed. So if, at some point, a non-human craft had been recovered, whether from a crash or some other method, then the infrastructure was already in place to conceal it, for generations if necessary. For believers, the question isn't, could these hangars shelter something not of this world? It's, do they still? Because it's been decades since the earliest, most explosive claims about Area 51 first surfaced. And still, the mystery hasn't gone anywhere. And still, satellite imagery continues to show the same long, silent hangars, some now expanded. Every so often, a new structure appears. No explanation, no announcement. If a reverse engineering program does exist, perhaps some of the older craft have been dismantled and replaced. Or maybe certain pieces are simply too rare, too volatile, or too foreign to ever leave storage. Through all the guesses, one image holds steady. A line of still hangars along Groom Lake, their insides hidden from everyone, except a very select few. Behind those sealed doors might lie objects not just capable of tipping military balance, but rewriting what we know of history, energy, and the limits of physics. And while those doors remain shut, the skies beyond them stay open, at least in theory. There, outside the border, A few watchful eyes have claimed glimpses, movements that seem to echo what might be inside, lights in the dark, shapes cutting across the horizon, sudden acceleration that no known technology could produce. In the next chapter, we leave the base behind, turning toward the desert, to hear from those who say they saw it for themselves. Chapter 4. Witnesses Outside the Fence. The hangars at Area 51 are sealed off to everyone, but the desert outside its massive perimeter, still open, technically. In practice, it's a thin slice of land, bordered by weathered warning signs, constant patrols, and the quiet presence of anonymous trucks parked on distant ridges. Yet even here, in this exposed openness, some say the secrets have slipped into view. For decades, a small determined crowd has gathered at the edges of Groom Lake's exclusion zone, ranchers working nearby land, hikers reaching public peaks, desert explorers driving the lonely stretch of Highway 375, eyes toward the sky, watching, waiting, hoping the hidden crosses the boundary line. Among the most consistent stories are those told by longtime ranchers, families who've worked the land for generations. They know the rhythm of regular patrols, the deep hum of a hovering chopper, the glowing punch of afterburners at night. But they also remember evenings when the desert didn't behave like it should. Not noise, but light would cut through the darkness, moving low and deliberate across the brush, gliding in silence toward the base, then suddenly zipping off at sharp, impossible angles no traditional aircraft could handle. Some lights skimmed just above the terrain. Others shot straight up, paused in place for a moment, then blinked out of sight. The people who saw them weren't tourists. They knew what to expect from military drills, and they insist these were not exercises. The restricted zone isn't just a line on a GPS. It's a layered defense, dirt access roads, motion detectors, and ever-present eyes. Locals call them camo dudes. They wait in silent, unmarked pickup trucks, usually white or desert tan, perched on high slopes, binoculars always ready. Get too close, and within minutes, they'll be between you and the boundary fence. No words, just presence, clear and unmistakable. Back in the earlier years, before the perimeter expanded in the 90s, there were places you could stand and get a sweeping view of the basin. From those hills, people said they witnessed things rise silently from the desert floor, or descend as if suspended by something invisible. One former prospector still remembers the night, out at his camp in the late 80s, when everything changed. He'd pitched his tent on public land, just far enough out with a partial view toward the southern edge of Groom Lake. That evening, as twilight wrapped around the hills, he saw something moving, slow and silent, a shadow gliding rather than flying, dark, oval, and flat. A faint bluish glow outlined its shape. It hovered there, briefly, then drifted forward and disappeared behind a ridge. Minutes later, the low pulse of helicopter blades swept over the area. Searchlights cut across the ground, sweeping, scanning, as if something had gone missing, or someone had. Other sightings came with something more direct, a silent message from the base. In the early 1990s, a small group of friends made their way to a known observation point north of Groom Lake. They'd just settled in when they saw it. A bright light surged upward from above the base, rose quickly, then stopped, perfectly still. It pulsed once, again, then rocketed upward at a harsh, unnatural angle, gone in seconds. Moments later, two military trucks pulled in on the road below. They didn't approach. They didn't speak. They parked, exactly between the group and the base. Clear skies. Clear warning. No words needed. Some reports go beyond witnessing. Some involve cameras. In the early 2000s, a man from Las Vegas made several trips to the area, armed with high-powered zoom lenses, hoping to catch something unusual on film. On one visit, he claimed he succeeded. A diamond-shaped metallic object hovered above the main runway. It caught the morning sunlight, shimmering at the edges like it was bending light around itself. But before he could snap more than a few photos, two security vehicles appeared from opposite sides. He was confronted, questioned. His film was confiscated, and he was escorted back toward U.S. Route 93. Skeptics often argue that sightings like these don't require anything extraterrestrial. Area 51's long role in experimental aviation, they say, makes it easy to explain. Stealth drones, radar test platforms, unpublicized fighter prototypes, all strange enough to fool the untrained. But many of the people who've come forward aren't untrained. They're ranchers who've worked for decades near restricted airspace. They're pilots with thousands of logged hours. They're former military personnel who've seen every known aircraft in the skies, and they describe things with no wings, no visible means of propulsion, and flight profiles that don't match any known technology. Some describe objects moving so slowly they seem to ignore gravity itself, hovering still, unaffected, even as desert winds rushed through the valley. Others recall bursts of motion too quick to track, like the craft didn't fly, but jumped from one location to the next. A few accounts mention massive forms drifting across the night sky in perfect silence, blocking out starlight before slipping away. One story stands out. In 1995, a man was driving the extraterrestrial highway when he pulled off near a mile marker to stretch his legs. That's when he spotted them. Three glowing orbs above the southern mountain ridge. They hovered in a loose triangular formation, drifting together in perfect sync. Then, in an instant, two vanished without a sound. The third shot straight upward, fading until it became just another star. Minutes later, a line of military trucks sped past him, headed toward the southern edge of the base. In earlier decades, finding good vantage points was easier. Freedom Ridge and Whitesides were local legends, drawing UFO watchers in the late 80s for their clear, distant views of Groom Lake. But as public interest surged, so did restrictions. By the mid-1990s, both ridges were pulled into the official boundary. Publicly, the reason was national security and safety. Privately, it meant two of the best legal vantage points were gone. Today, the last high ground still open is Tikaboo Peak, a punishing 3-mile climb across rugged desert, hauling water, camera gear, and the awareness that the moment you raise binoculars, you're being watched. Even from there, the view is distant. The base appears only as a thin cluster of shapes on the heat-rippled horizon. But those who still make the trek say everything about the journey is worth it. For some, the goal is clear: to see something, anything. A silver glint in a perfect sky, a flash of light lifting from the runway, 1 second of the extraordinary in a place defined by silence. For others, it's about standing at the edge, touching the boundary between public land and a government secret, high-powered lenses ready, cataloging every flicker against the horizon, part of something older now, a decades-long ritual of watching the most off-limits airspace on Earth. Even when nothing appears, the experience lingers. The wide, empty span of the dry lake bed, the hush that settles between gusts, the hum of something unseen above. It all feels like the surface of a deeper truth below. And once in a while, rare but real, someone sees more, something they never forget. A shape lifting vertically in complete silence, a metallic gleam catching that last sliver of light, a cluster of lights fracturing apart, vanishing into the open sky. And for those who witness moments like that, the questions never fade. What was that? Why was it flying over Groom Lake? Was it a black project, years ahead of known tech, or something recovered, something from elsewhere, flown only in the one airspace trusted to keep it hidden? Whatever the answer, those glimpses always drift back to one place. The sealed hangars, the shadowed bays, the rumored chambers beneath the dry lake bed, exactly where this story began. No matter how tightly the fences close in, no matter how far the perimeter pushes out, every now and then, a few seconds of the unexplained still slip through the cracks. And if those moments, brief as they are all the world on the outside gets, then what matters most must lie within. In the next chapter, we follow growing claims that what's visible at Area 51 is only half the picture, that beneath the sun-bleached desert floor lies an unseen world of tunnels, vaults, and research bays, a place where the strange objects spotted in the sky are stored, studied, and maybe even rebuilt. Chapter 5: Theories of Alien Technology Storage. If Area 51 really does house non-human craft, the next question follows fast. Where are they being kept, and how are they being studied? For decades, whistleblowers, former employees, and independent researchers have pointed to the same theory: that beneath the surface structures, the fencing, airstrips, and hangars, exists an entirely separate layer, a hidden network of underground chambers, corridors, and labs designed not just to conceal what's inside, but to limit access to only the most cleared, the most trusted. The concept of military installations having underground sections isn't new. Throughout the Cold War, high-level command centers were built deep beneath U.S. soil, shielded from satellites and nuclear strikes. But in the case of Area 51, many say the secrecy goes deeper, much deeper. The claim that below the lake bed in concealed vaults rest fragments and sometimes full structures not built on Earth. Alleged insiders describe a space eerily clinical, silent, sterile, and strictly confined. They say the main access points are disguised within ordinary surface buildings, appearing mundane from the outside. Through them, staff are taken below by guarded elevators, monitored by multiple ID verifications, biometrics, key cards, retina scans. Deep underground, corridors lead to scientific labs where pieces of recovered craft are analyzed, inch by inch. The word they use most often is compartmentalization. No one knows the full picture. A single engineer might spend 5 years studying a metal's conductivity, never told if it belongs to a propulsion system, outer hull, or internal component. Only a handful of project leads, they say, are cleared to ever view a full assembly. These ideas echo claims made by individuals like Bob Lazar, who described working not at Groom Lake, but a remote site nearby, S4, allegedly south of Area 51, across from Papoose Lake. He spoke of 9 craft, none identical, each stored inside hangars built straight into the mountain's edge, their entrances angled to blend into the rock. Whether S4 exists as described remains debated, but the idea of separate or underground storage has never left the Area 51 canon. Some researchers reference declassified geological maps and satellite imagery. They point to suspicious anomalies, land that appears excavated and later packed, service roads that disappear into mountain faces with no visible exit, aerial photographs that show ground textures suggesting buried construction, though, to this day, the base minimizes any sign of what may lie below. Then, there are the tunnel theories. Whispers that Area 51 is connected, via deep underground transit systems, to other classified sites in Nevada, and perhaps even beyond state lines. The alleged purpose? To move sensitive materials, including alien technology, without risking surveillance or satellite tracking. If true, such a system would allow a recovered craft, found anywhere in the American West, to vanish underground within hours, shielded, silent, gone. But not every theory focuses on full spacecraft. Some researchers suggest the true significance isn't in entire vehicles, but in their smallest components. Not the craft themselves, but what they're made of, materials, propulsion systems, even the power sources. These are said to be stored in heavily shielded vaults, accessible only to personnel with top clearance and the technical knowledge required to analyze them. A recurring claim is that certain substances react in strange, highly specific ways to heat, light, or electromagnetic fields, showing properties no man-made material has ever matched. A few alleged insiders describe rooms where pieces of craft are suspended from thick cables, held that way, they say, to isolate them from interference, vibration, or other environmental variables. Others mention sealed chambers with tightly controlled temperature and pressure, designed to preserve delicate alien alloys or systems too fragile for standard lab conditions. Some of these facilities, according to witness reports, feature glass-walled observation zones, small teams of scientists monitoring from a distance, while automated systems run diagnostics from inside. For skeptics, this might sound like descriptions pulled from any advanced aerospace R&D lab. Sensitive human technologies, like radar-absorbing skin, stealth composites, or exotic fuel tech, would demand similar protection. But believers push back, saying the depth of secrecy reported goes far beyond even the most classified human programs, and that the extreme isolation and security make more sense if what's being protected isn't just advanced, it's not from here. The connection to experimental aircraft history remains the bridge between the plausible and the extraordinary. Area 51 has a proven track record: the A-12 Oxcart, the F-117 Nighthawk. Aircraft that pushed the boundaries of flight, designed, tested, and perfected in total secrecy. For those who see the alien link as credible, it's not hard to imagine the same system being used, this time not to create something new, but to replicate something recovered. And some go further. They suggest stealth itself, along with critical breakthroughs in propulsion, may have been accelerated through studying non-terrestrial machines. One theory, long-standing and quietly persistent, is that recovered craft have been broken down, deconstructed, each piece assigned to its own program, its own subdivision, its own contractor. By fragmenting the source, no single entity sees the full design. That structure, researchers argue, helps prevent leaks and ensures secrecy, even if parts of the truth slip out. It might also explain how unusual materials, allegedly recovered from crash sites like Roswell, have turned up in different places over time, linked to different aerospace firms, each isolated, each tracing back to a different compartmentalized program. And while the full scope of this theory remains hidden, supporters often cite extreme security procedures as supporting evidence. Whistleblowers describe rooms so secure, even high-ranking officers weren't granted access. Entry to some areas, they claim, required biometric scans, armed accompaniment, and limited briefings issued only minutes before entry. One former security contractor claimed that select inbound deliveries, often handled by outside trucks, had to be sealed before reaching the base. The drivers never saw what they were transporting. All they were told was where to stop. Once the truck reached the perimeter, it was taken from the driver, immediately secured by base personnel and driven inside. The driver himself was escorted away, never seeing where the delivery ended up. There are long-standing rumors of so-called black labs, facilities buried so deep they're believed to be shielded even from seismic detection. These hidden environments, according to some, house the most sensitive work happening on base. Not aircraft design, but the testing of propulsion systems reported to manipulate gravity itself, or the attempt to activate long-dormant energy sources not created on Earth. Whether such systems have ever been successfully reactivated or even understood is still unknown. To some researchers, the strongest support for underground storage is the absence of what's above. In all the decades of stories, speculation, and satellite monitoring, there has never been a clear, verified photo of an alien craft at Area 51. Not one. If these objects were stored inside standard hangars, even for brief periods, they'd be at risk of exposure. A single image, a single frame could have escaped, but nothing has. To believers, that silence speaks clearly. Whatever is inside doesn't stay on the surface. It's buried, where no image can reach it. This secrecy has created a paradox. The more tightly hidden these alleged systems are, the harder they are to verify. But that same inaccessibility keeps the theories alive. Each new building, every shift in the security perimeter, every hint of renovation is seen, not as routine infrastructure, but as evidence that the hidden layer is growing. Skeptics argue that most claims about these underground vaults originate from anonymous sources or secondhand accounts. Without direct physical evidence, they remain speculation. Still, the stories persist, not just in isolated corners of the internet, but across decades, told by unrelated people in different years with no contact between them. It's this consistency, this quiet echo through time, that keeps the mystery rooted in the public imagination. For believers, the final question isn't just whether the technology is stored here, it's what's being done with it. Is the material simply archived, studied through microscopes, then locked away again? Or is it being refined, applied, folded into black programs that shape the aircraft of tomorrow? Whatever the answer, One thing is constant. What's beneath Area 51 is not meant to be seen. The surface is already among the most restricted places on the planet. If the real secrets lie below it, the vaults are deeper, the walls thicker, the locks unbreakable. The odds of any outsider setting foot there? Close to zero. And yet, the idea remains that somewhere under this desert, in rooms lit by cold white light, are answers to questions older than history, machines built beyond Earth, materials that defy our science, systems capable of rewriting what we know about the universe itself. Chapter 6: Alleged Autopsies and Biological Evidence. If Area 51 truly stores alien technology, then the most explosive claim is this: that it also stores alien life, or what's left of it. The suggestion isn't just that non-human craft have been recovered, but the beings who traveled in them recovered too. For decades, the idea of autopsies and biological containment has circulated quietly but persistently around Area 51, fueled by insider claims, questionable imagery, and decades of whispered leaks. The most famous origin point comes from one story: the 1947 Roswell incident. What began as a crash report of a flying disc was quickly replaced by the official explanation, a weather balloon. But in the alternative version, which survived long after the headlines faded, the debris included something else: bodies, small, humanoid, and unlike anything ever seen. While much of that wreckage is said to have been sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, some believe the biological remains were later relocated, moved out of public reach, to the most restricted facility available, Area 51. Alleged insiders describe temperature-controlled rooms buried deep beneath the desert floor, lit by cold white fluorescent lights. Inside, stainless steel tables, sealed containers, some large, some small enough to fit in a suitcase. Conditions are strictly regulated: humidity, temperature. Airflow access requires the highest known clearance. The claim: some cases contain preserved tissue samples, others complete bodies, frozen in cryogenic suspension. One detail repeats across these accounts: the mention of NAR. Level 3, or Blue Lab classifications. Code names that, according to supposed insiders, refer to biocontainment zones within the base, described like advanced medical labs, with negative pressure rooms, airlocks, and mandatory decontamination showers, all to prevent airborne transfer of whatever might still remain. The autopsies themselves are shrouded in silence and contradiction. Some sources claim direct involvement. Others describe only seeing photographs or grainy film reels viewed during classified briefings. Yet across accounts, the physical description is strangely consistent: beings between 3 and 4 feet tall, large craniums, subtle or unusually small facial features, thin, elongated limbs, skin described as gray, faded, and textured more like parchment than living tissue. In the 1990s, one piece of footage pushed the narrative into public view: the alien autopsy film. Released by British producer Ray Santilli, it showed a surgical team dissecting what appeared to be a gray humanoid figure. Critics called it fake. Santilli eventually admitted it was a reconstruction, supposedly based on real footage he once saw. Still, the film reignited interest and left lingering questions. If this wasn't the real footage, Does the real footage still exist somewhere? Some whistleblowers insist the autopsies weren't performed at Area 51 at all, but instead occurred at other classified labs, with remains later shipped to Nevada for long-term storage. Others believe the opposite. Area 51's isolation, layered access points, and no-fly restrictions made it ideal for carrying out such procedures on-site, beyond the eyes of the world. Then there are the most unsettling versions. Accounts that describe biological material that wasn't fully dead. A few alleged insiders have gone further, claiming that some beings were still alive, if only briefly, after recovery. These accounts are rare and highly disputed, but they describe beings held in controlled environments, still breathing, still moving, subtle, slow, just enough to suggest they hadn't fully died. In these reports, any surviving entities were kept alive for as long as possible. Whether communication ever occurred remains unclear. From a scientific perspective, any handling of non-human biological material, alien or not, would demand extreme containment. On Earth, laboratories designed for the deadliest viruses already exist. They're called Biosafety Level 4 facilities. These labs are built with airtight barriers, independent airflow systems, and specialized waste protocols. No outside exposure, no margin for error. Descriptions of Area 51's alleged blue labs seem to mirror this setup, but adapted for something humanity has never encountered before. For skeptics, the idea of living or stored biological entities can be dismissed as confusion, exaggeration, or outright fiction. What some call alien bodies might have been high-altitude life support mannequins, advanced crash test dummies, or experimental military tech with vaguely human-like design. In fact, during the 1950s and 60s, the U.S. Air Force conducted parachute programs using lifelike dummies, dropped from high above, and occasionally recovered under strange conditions. Some of those recoveries directly fueled the original wave of UFO rumors. But to believers, the pattern is harder to ignore. Stories from people decades apart, with no connection, describing similar things. The same anatomical features, the same methods of cold storage, the same levels of secrecy, above even top-secret designations. Some claim first-hand involvement, others describe fleeting glimpses, overheard conversations, or classified references they were never meant to see. Yet, somehow, the descriptions align. And one compelling thread ties this biological question back to the original theory of reverse engineering. Because if Area 51's engineers do have access to alien craft, then studying the pilots could be just as essential as studying the machines. Understanding how these beings functioned, their internal biology, neural architecture, environmental needs, could unlock critical answers. How did they interface with their ships? What systems did they require to survive spaceflight? And why did they crash if they were so advanced? Some researchers take the theory further. They suggest that not all recovered materials are purely mechanical, that some are hybrid, a fusion of biology and technology. This claim often falls under the idea of biomechanical integration, the possibility that a craft is partially organic, or that pilot and ship are not separate, but function as a single living system. If that's true, storing a body would be inseparable from storing the craft itself. They are quite literally connected. Over the years, researchers have tried to chart a map, To locate the places inside Area 51 where such biological material might be stored, satellite imagery offers no answer, and those who might know the truth rarely speak, at least not about where the most sensitive material is kept. Some believe the biological remains are stored in chambers directly beneath the main hangars, allowing them to be transferred immediately from recovery vehicles into secure containment. Others think they're hidden far deeper, in isolated vaults, sealed off and accessible only by private monitored elevators. As always, security is said to be total. Personnel working anywhere near these alleged labs are tracked at all times, and discussion about contents, purpose, or protocols is strictly forbidden. One story, repeated across multiple versions, tells of a contractor who took a wrong turn inside the facility. He says he stepped briefly into the wrong corridor, just long enough to glimpse a room beyond a partially open door. Inside, a surgical table, bright overhead lights, and "Still with us, everyone? Just checking in." If you're enjoying this deep dive into the secrets of Area 51, don't forget to give this episode a like. And if you're new here, hit subscribe so you never miss the next layer of UFO history and hidden mysteries. Drop a comment below. What do you think is really buried beneath the Nevada desert? We want to hear your story. Now, settle in, because the next chapter is just a breath away. Chapter 7: Insider Accounts and Leaked Testimonies. For all the satellite scans, long-lens photos from distant ridges, and official denials, the most enduring stories about Area 51 have always come from those who claim to have seen it from the inside. They are engineers, the guards, the contractors, the military personnel who whisper about things that, to the public, exist only in rumor. Some go public, openly attaching their names to interviews and documentaries. Others remain anonymous, their voices scrambled, their faces hidden. A few have chosen to speak only after leaving the country, believing distance might offer a layer of safety. What they describe is more than experimental aircraft. They speak of encounters with craft, with technology, and sometimes with beings they insist are not of this earth. One of the earliest such leaks came from a former radar technician. He claimed that, in the late 1960s, he was assigned to monitor the skies above Groom Lake, tasked with identifying any unauthorized activity near the base. But on more than one occasion, the unknown came from within the restricted airspace. Radar blips appeared where no aircraft were expected. They moved at impossible speeds, halted suddenly, then vanished. When he asked superiors for clarification, the response was simple: "Don't ask again." Security personnel have shared similar brushes with the unexplained. One former guard recounted being assigned to an overnight post inside a sealed hangar. The instructions were clear: stay inside the booth. Do not approach the floor. Do not look beneath the tarps. But curiosity is a difficult thing to contain. During a break, with the hangar floor empty, he stepped out, briefly, enough to glimpse a curved metallic shape, smooth, seamless. Its surface is almost liquid under the fluorescent lights. Within seconds, he was returned to the booth. No explanation. The next day, he was reassigned. Then there are the contractors, temporary labor, electricians, haulers, technicians, often brought in for single tasks, without ever being told the full scope of the operation. They see fragments. They're not briefed. They're not debriefed. They're moved quickly, quietly, and always within limits. One truck driver described delivering a crate that seemed off, not in appearance, but in weight. The distribution didn't feel normal. Nothing shifted, no rattle, just dense, heavy silence. An electrician recalled following a winding path through unmarked doors, led by escort, only realizing later that the route was likely designed to prevent him from ever learning the real layout of the facility. Each had seen just enough to feel it, that something strange was happening inside, but never enough to prove it. One particularly compelling account came from an avionics specialist, assigned, he said, to a restricted evaluation program focused on foreign technology. The object he was asked to examine didn't resemble anything standard. No wires, no panels, no recognizable controls. Instead, it was made of curved, seamless material, free of edges or fasteners. When touched in certain places, lights would activate, forming shifting patterns across the interior. No circuits, no visible power source, just a response, triggered by contact. He believed it was a kind of control interface, but who it was meant to control and what it was supposed to operate remained unknown. Shortly after, his assignment was changed. He was moved to unrelated duties. The device was never mentioned again. Not every insider account involves an alien craft directly. Some focus on materials, substances that don't behave how they should. Metals, for instance, that are feather-light, but resist all standard cutting tools. Alloys that bend, then revert, perfectly, as if they remember their original shape. In the 1990s, a machinist described working with a substance he couldn't explain. A dull, silvery sheet, paper-thin, yet unnaturally strong. He said it could be folded effortlessly, then spring back into shape, leaving no crease. Whether that material came from another world or from a laboratory on this one, he never found out. And then there are the accounts of beings. These are rarer, often more difficult to verify. Even many UFO researchers tread lightly here, but they persist. One man, claiming to be a former medic assigned to the base, described an urgent call. He was escorted into a sealed medical bay under armed supervision. Inside was a small figure, motionless on a gurney. Not human, not quite. A large rounded head, thin limbs, eyes that seemed too large for the skeletal face. He was instructed to monitor vitals, to keep records, nothing more. No explanation, no questions. He remained on that assignment for 2 nights. On the third, the room was empty. The subject was gone, and he was never asked about it again. Of course, across all of these accounts, there's another constant: disinformation. Intelligence agencies have a well-documented history of seeding false stories, designed to confuse rivals or test public response. In the world of UFOs, that tactic becomes even more effective. Mix a genuine leak with a fabrication, and suddenly, no one knows what to believe. Some researchers suggest that at least parts of the Area 51 legend were deliberately created. A myth by design. A smokescreen to protect actual projects, military or otherwise. But even amid the noise, there are pieces that connect. Descriptions of hangar layouts, security behaviors, and flight routines. Repeated across decades by people who never met and never compared stories. That consistency is what keeps researchers searching, because beneath the denials and the hoaxes and the noise, there may still be a signal. One recurring detail is the extreme level of compartmentalization within Area 51. Personnel only see their task, their hallway, their door. A propulsion engineer might never speak to the person studying avionics. A guard may not know what they're guarding. The result, even if someone talks, they can only leak a piece, never the full picture. Each testimony is incomplete, each leak a fragment. Some insiders even claim that the most unusual vehicles, if they exist at all, are never moved by day. They're stored away until nightfall, brought out only when satellites are elsewhere, tested only in darkness. From the ridgelines surrounding Area 51, trained observers and curious onlookers have watched the darkness take shape. During the late-night test hours, some report glimpses of motion. Lights that dart across the sky with sudden acceleration, hover in total silence, then disappear in a burst of impossible speed. To many believers, these sightings offer something rare, a public view, however brief, into the secret world described by insiders. And here, the spy plane connection resurfaces. More than one former insider has admitted what they saw may well have been human technology, prototypes decades ahead of public release, just like the A-12 ox cart once was, just like the F-117 before it was revealed. But others aren't so sure. They describe vehicles that didn't behave like planes, and certainly not like anything inside aviation today. Craft that hovered without engines, maneuvered without banking, or accelerated from stillness into the sky, near instantly and in silence. For the men and women who dare to speak, the stakes are real. Many only come forward after retirement or from outside U.S. borders. Some report receiving legal warnings. Others believe they were followed or monitored after speaking out. A few say they lost clearances. Some claim they were threatened. Whether the pressure came from official sources or impassioned believers is difficult to prove. But the result in either case is the same: silence. For the public, these leaked testimonies serve as a kind of bridge, a glimpse over the wall surrounding Area 51. They never define the full truth. They never give total proof, but they offer just enough to suggest something extraordinary remains behind the fences. To skeptics, these stories are cautionary. They highlight the fallibility of memory, the power of storytelling, and the ever-present danger of seeing what we want to believe. But to believers, they're puzzle pieces, partial truths spread across time, fragments, each one hinting at something larger that continues to remain hidden. A guard who saw a tarp ripple, a technician who touched a panel that lit without power, a medic who monitored someone who didn't fit the human profile. Each story adds a thread woven into the tapestry of America's most protected myth. And whether these accounts are truth, disinformation, or complete fabrication, they ensure one thing: the legend of Area 51 endures. In the next chapter, the story returns to the skies, to the air above Groom Lake, where objects are said to perform impossible maneuvers, in full view of the most heavily restricted airspace in the country. These elements repeat, location to location, nation to nation, which raises the possibility that what's visible over Area 51 is just one part of something larger. For the casual observer standing on a distant ridge, binoculars in hand, it's always the same rhythm. Hours pass. Nothing moves. Nothing blinks. The desert is still. Then, a streak. Too fast to track. Too odd to identify. Just 1 second. Then gone. By the time your eyes adjust, it's gone. And you're left with only a question. Did you witness something extraordinary? Or just another classified aircraft? And so, the legend continues, fed by fleeting lights, by whispered confirmations, by the quiet certainty that whatever flies in those skies is seen only by those the base permits to see it. For the rest of the world, the search for proof goes on, but clear answers remain out of reach. In the next chapter, we descend from the skies into the laboratories to examine one of the most controversial claims tied to Area 51, a mysterious material said to be the key to alien propulsion. Chapter 9. Element 115, The Mystery. In the early 1990s, the term Element 115 entered the UFO conversation, not through scientific papers or chemistry labs, but through the testimony of a man who claimed to have worked on non-human technology at a facility linked to Area 51. His name was Bob Lazar. His claims, already explored earlier in this series, remain the center of intense debate. But perhaps his most provocative statement was this: that a stable form of element 115 did exist, and it was the fuel source for craft not made on Earth. According to Lazar, it wasn't theoretical. He had seen it with his own eyes, handled it under strict containment. Small wedges of dense metallic material stored in secure containers capable of generating powerful gravitational fields when used inside a specialized reactor. At the time, Lazar's story caused turbulence in scientific circles because element 115 had never been synthesized, let alone stabilized. It wasn't until 2003, over a decade later, that Russian scientists succeeded in creating the element in a laboratory. Today, it is formally known as moscovium, but the synthesized version was highly unstable, with isotopes that decayed in less than a second. Lazar insisted that his version was different. He described the material as dull, almost featureless, but unusually heavy. Suggestive, he claimed, of an unprecedented atomic configuration. Each piece, he said, was small, roughly palm-sized, and shielded in transport containers to protect handlers from radiation. Placed inside a proprietary reactor module, it allegedly created a distortion in space-time, allowing the vehicle to bend gravity itself. This, Lazar claimed, was the mechanism behind the craft's unique behavior: silent, hovering, instant acceleration, sharp directional changes with no inertia. It didn't fly faster, it shortened the distance. To many, the idea sounded more like fiction than physics, and for skeptics, it still is. The instability of current isotopes of element 115 is well documented. Under conventional nuclear physics, a stable version would require entirely different properties, possibly in the realm of undiscovered super-heavy elements. But to believers, the timing was uncanny. Bob Lazar described element 115 a decade before it appeared on the periodic table. Even if the sample he described hasn't been reproduced or verified, some see the very mention of it, years ahead of its official discovery, as validation. Skeptics counter that predicting such elements isn't difficult. Higher-numbered elements are expected. Their appearance is built into the periodic framework, so Lazar naming it first, they argue, means little. The challenge, scientists say, isn't identifying new elements, it's producing them, which means Lazar's use of the name Element 115 may have simply been a guess, a prediction that happened to mirror what would eventually emerge from a Russian laboratory. Still, within UFO research circles, Element 115 has reached near mythical status, not just as a theoretical isotope, but as the alleged key to alien propulsion, a material so far removed from known physics that it could represent an entirely new form of energy, one capable of bending gravity, distorting space-time, or eliminating propulsion as we understand it. In this narrative, Area 51 isn't just a vault for recovered spacecraft, but the testing ground for the fuel that powers them, and not all support for that idea comes directly. Some accounts from alleged insiders suggest it indirectly. One former contractor claimed to have seen a reactor core, a perfectly spherical device in a sealed lab. It emitted a soft blue glow. No wires, no fuel lines, just a hum. Technicians worked in full-body protective suits, monitoring instruments, watching readouts shift as gravitational fields distorted in the room. He was never told what material powered it, but many who've heard his account point back to the same possibility. It fits Lazar's description of Element 115. Other rumors focus not on the fuel itself, but how it would be handled. If a stable form of Element 115 exists, transporting it would require unprecedented caution and secrecy. Too dangerous to lose, too valuable to replicate, too rare to reveal. Some researchers believe they've tracked operations involving heavily shielded containers arriving at Area 51, flanked by armed convoys, operated under total silence, movements more in line with transporting nuclear material, then routine military cargo. Then comes the question of origin. If such a substance exists, where does it come from? Lazar speculated that only small amounts existed at the facility, perhaps just a few hundred grams, recovered from multiple crash sites. Others have suggested a more complex explanation, that stable isotopes could form naturally in deep space, in the gravitational furnaces of collapsed stars or mined off-world in environmental conditions Earth simply can't replicate. Skeptics remain unmoved. They point to Moscovium, the real-world version of Element 115, and note its instability is well understood. It exists for milliseconds and then decay. In their view, a stable version would overturn decades of atomic theory. And without physical samples, they argue, Element 115 remains a story, not a discovery. But the story lingers. Even mainstream news coverage of UFOs continues to reference it. Because in a landscape filled with blurred lights and anonymous claims, Element 115 offers something rare, a concrete detail, something you can imagine. A dense metallic wedge, locked in a sealed vault, not just the power source, but the core mechanism of something not built on Earth. The U.S. military has never acknowledged possession of Element 115. Officially, its only form lives briefly in nuclear laboratories, never stable, never controlled, never real. But Area 51's continuous secrecy leaves space for possibility. If a stable version exists, this would be the place to hide it. The spy plane precedent reappears here, but in quieter form. This base has long developed propulsion systems that push the limits of human capability. It doesn't stretch belief to imagine it pushing decades, maybe centuries, beyond what the public understands today. In that light, Element 115 becomes more than a fuel source. It becomes a symbol, a marker between human pioneering and something else entirely. For some, the secrecy around the substance is the most suspicious part. If there's nothing to hide, why not allow independent testing? Why not open the vaults and let physics settle the debate? But the refusal to engage, skeptics say, only fuels speculation. It widens the gap between the official story and public imagination. Even within the UFO research community, Element 115 divides opinion. Some treat it as a smoking gun, a physical anchor to decades of otherwise ethereal claims. Others call it a distraction, a single detail inflated into illusion. Captivating, yes, but ultimately unverifiable. And so, like much of the Area 51 story, Element 115 remains suspended between two worlds, one of science and one of belief. It's either the most significant technological discovery in human history, or an elaborate myth built on ends that don't quite meet. But one thing is certain: the story of Element 115 fits seamlessly into the greater mythology of Area 51. It carries the same themes: secrecy, advanced technology, and the implication of an origin far from Earth. Whether it's a real substance locked in a vault beneath the desert floor or a carefully placed distraction, it continues to do one thing very well: it keeps the mystery alive. In the next chapter, we turn our eyes back to the ground, to the lights that move over Groom Lake, the ones that have raised questions for decades. Some may be spycraft, others experimental drones. But a few, if witnesses can be believed, move in ways no human machine should. Chapter 10: Strange Lights. Over Groom Lake night in the Nevada desert stretches endlessly. The air is dry, still. It carries the smallest sounds for miles, and most nights near the boundary of Area 51 are silent, too silent. To those who've camped along its legal edges, the darkness is broken only by stars, until something brighter and far stranger appears. For decades, witnesses have reported lights over Groom Lake, moving in ways no conventional aircraft should. Some glow with a steady hum, others pulse, changing color mid-flight. A few track slow, precise paths across the sky, only to vanish instantly, as if someone flipped a switch. And perhaps the most unsettling fact: these strange displays occur inside one of the most restricted airspaces on Earth, where nothing is supposed to fly unless authorized. Many accounts come from civilians, night watchers, enthusiasts who trek to legal vantage points like Tikaboo Peak or long stretches of dirt roads that border the no-cross zones. They know when to look, they know what's normal, and they can tell when it's not. Some nights, they say the sky over the base simply comes alive. A lone white orb might rise slowly from behind the ridgeline, hovering in place, no sound, then shoot upward until it vanishes into blackness. Others report sharp angled movements, right-angle turns, and lateral shifts that would tear apart any jet or drone. Some of these incidents may be tied to black projects. The skies above Groom Lake have long tested the edge of aviation. From experimental stealth bombers to reconnaissance drones to prototype the public still doesn't know they exist. A triangle of lights in the early 1980s could have been the F-117 Nighthawk, still classified at the time. A speed blur or sonic flash in the 1990s may be connected to the rumored Aurora project, but not every sighting fits the timeline, and not all of them make sense. Multiple observers, separate groups, over separate years, have described objects that made no sound at all, no hum, no engine, no sonic boom. One group, camped just outside the legal fence, recalled a glowing sphere, roughly the size of a car, drifting silently over the barrier. It hovered, moved without effort, and slid back into the darkness without leaving a trail. No chase, no warning, just a moment. Unexplained. It hovered for nearly a full minute, then accelerated, straight into the stars. No noise, no sonic boom, no contrail, just silence. Security teams, known to locals as camo dudes, are a constant presence around Area 51's perimeter. They observe quietly, but they're often seen before the lights appear. Some witnesses have noted an unsettling pattern. That activity in the skies sometimes follows soon after security arrives. This has led to speculation. Are the lights a controlled display? An intended signal or misdirection? Is someone behind the fence watching who's watching them? One of the most widely circulated public encounters came from two hikers in the mid-1990s. After reaching a ridge west of the facility, just before midnight, they saw a blue light hovering over the runway, sharp, silent, stationary. Then it moved, horizontally, no wings, no engines. It tilted upward and shot into the sky at an angle no human-piloted craft could survive. They returned to the same spot 1 month later. This time, the light reappeared. But now it was accompanied by a dim red glow, following it steadily, as though the two were flying in formation. Other observers have described sightings that began as ordinary navigation lights in standard patterns, mimicking familiar flight signatures, until the pattern shifts. A series of lights blink out, then merge into a single orb and vanish. This merging of the explainable and the impossible is a defining trait of Groom Lake encounters. It leaves even veteran skywatchers unsure of what they've seen. From a tactical standpoint, the skies above Groom Lake, officially restricted area R4808 North, offer ideal conditions for testing anything that needs to stay hidden. There are no civilian aircraft, no nearby towns, no pass-through traffic, just vast, empty desert and a patch of sky where the rules are different. If reverse-engineered craft exist, this would be the safest place in the world to fly them. Some former military insiders suggest the lights might belong to simulated aerial vehicles, purpose-built to look alien as part of low observability and maneuverability training. But others, including a number with engineering and aviation backgrounds, insist the maneuvers they've witnessed shed standard testing altogether. These aren't simulations, they argue. They're performance models of something else. One persistent claim involves the so-called window nights, short bursts of concentrated activity over the base, not random, deliberate, preceded by long stretches of silence. According to longtime watchers, these windows occur during optimal conditions: no satellite coverage, low wind, maximum darkness. During these events, multiple unidentified lights appear, Sharing the same airspace, these lights weave, split, accelerate, and vanish. Some believe these windows are designated test periods for crafts of non-human origin, and not all the lights are high in the sky. In recent years, several observers have reported seeing illumination within the base perimeter, objects moving just above the ground, glowing spheres or low-running lights, tracking between structures without visible propulsion. These lights, when reported up close, are often described as glowing orbs, skimming just a few feet above the desert floor, weaving between buildings, moving with precision, then vanishing into hangars or passing straight into the side of a mountain. Some witnesses claim to have seen them enter the rock itself, as if swallowed by a hidden entrance, invisible until used. Skeptics offer more grounded explanations. They suggest many sightings are misidentified. Experimental drones, test flares, or subtle atmospheric effects. In the clear desert air, under extreme heat, a shimmer might look like movement. Light from faraway vehicles might refract strangely through lenses. Camera sensors could distort reality in unexpected ways. And in a place as layered in secrecy as Area 51, the absence of clear photographic evidence makes it almost impossible to separate phenomena from illusion. But still, some descriptions repeat. The silent hover, sudden, seamless acceleration, impossible turns at right angles with no visible method of control. These traits don't just appear in Nevada, they're seen in UFO reports around the world. But here, they appear over Groom Lake, the most frequently mentioned location in theories about alien technology. Even among those who lean toward human-made possibilities, there's a quiet recognition of some things are harder to dismiss. Because if the U.S. is indeed flying objects with this level of performance, the implications are enormous. It would mean breakthroughs in propulsion, material science, and power systems far beyond anything acknowledged publicly. And if those breakthroughs were achieved through reverse engineering, this, Groom Lake, is where they'd be tested. It's why a small but dedicated community continues to return here year after year. Some are researchers, others are veterans, pilots, scientists, or simply curious. Most nights offer nothing more than the silence of the open range, the constant glow of the stars, and the blink of a distant commercial plane. But sometimes, a light appears, moving fast, perfectly controlled, far too quiet, and far too strange, just long enough to shift the question from "what did I see?" to "what else have I not?" It may last only moments, a single fluid motion against the black sky, but that moment is enough to keep the mystery alive. Whether these events are evidence of human ingenuity or signals of something much older, they've become part of the living folklore of Groom Lake. To some, fleeting proof that the facility hides technology outside the public timeline, a future we're not yet meant to see. And yet, for all the stories, decades of sightings, and thousands of unanswered questions, the U.S. government said nothing. Not for years, not for generations. In fact, it took until 2013 for any acknowledgement at all. And even then, when the truth was finally made public, what they revealed raised as many questions as it answered. Chapter 11. Government Silence and the 2013 Acknowledgement. For decades, it didn't exist. Until one day, it did. For more than half a century, the official stance of the U.S. government regarding Area 51 was simple. It didn't exist. Maps showed nothing but wilderness. Satellites captured only empty deserts. Official paperwork offered no reference, only redactions, omissions, or total silence. Even within classified channels, the name Area 51 was rarely, if ever, used. It was Groom Lake. It was the test site. It was somewhere else. But this silence was more than avoidance. It was a strategy. By refusing to acknowledge the base at all, officials could sidestep every question about what was being built there, what was flying there, and what, exactly, needed to be kept so deeply hidden. Whether Cold War reconnaissance platforms or something entirely different, the less said, the less that could be challenged. That silence held fast. For decades, journalists, researchers, and private citizens filed Freedom of Information Act requests, trying to force official records into the light, but the answers rarely changed. No such facility found, no responsive documents available, or reams of blacked-out pages. For many in the UFO research community, that silence became the proof. Proof that Area 51 was different. Proof that the government wasn't just hiding military hardware, but something far more extraordinary. The reasoning wasn't subtle. If there were nothing unusual happening at Groom Lake, why deny that Groom Lake existed? During the height of the Cold War, Area 51 served a strategic purpose. It birthed the U-2 spy plane, followed by the A-12 Oxcart, aircraft whose survival depended entirely on secrecy and altitude. Acknowledging their launch site would have opened the door for foreign intelligence to lock eyes on the program before it ever left the ground. Secrecy was operational, but it came with consequences. That same protective shroud, essential for national defense, also allowed rumors to grow, and it did. By the 1980s and 1990s, Area 51 was no longer just a military test site. It was the epicenter of America's alien narrative. Whistleblowers like Bob Lazar claimed to have worked on recovered craft within a facility just south of Groom Lake. Tourists and YouTubers camped outside the border zone, watching, waiting, filming strange lights in the sky, and still, no official comment. Even U.S. presidents, when asked directly, either sidestepped or joked. Then, in 2013, that silence finally broke. In response to a long-dormant Freedom of Information Act request, the CIA released a set of declassified documents, hidden among pages of technical reports in the margins of maps and photographs. It was a name. Area 51. For the first time in its history, the United States government officially acknowledged that the base was real. The documents confirmed core facts long suspected by aviation historians, that the base had been used to test the U-2 and A-12 programs, that its secluded environment, distant from civilian observation, made it the ideal site to develop next-generation aircraft in total secrecy. That flights conducted over Groom Lake often triggered UFO reports, not because they were aliens, but because they were unknown. It was a small revelation, and for many, it offered no surprises. But for others, it was the proof they'd been waiting for, a silent admission that something had been buried in the desert, and for the first time in 50 years, the government wasn't denying it. And yet, when the documents were finally released in 2013, They said nothing about UFOs, nothing about alien craft, nothing remotely otherworldly. For some, the release was evidence that the government was, finally, telling the truth. For others, it was seen as something more calculated, a carefully managed disclosure designed to appear transparent while leaving deeper mysteries untouched. By confirming the existence of Area 51, officials could redirect the conversation away from alien theories and back toward Cold War history. Spy planes, test programs, and high-altitude reconnaissance. It felt honest, but also controlled. Still, the acknowledgement marked a subtle victory for those who had spent decades documenting Groom Lake from the outside. For years, official denials had painted them as fringe theorists. Now, at least on the question of whether Area 51 was real, they had been vindicated. But for many, this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a new question. If the government could keep an entire military base hidden for over 50 years, what else might they be keeping from the public? If the hangars of Groom Lake once held aircraft decades ahead of known technology, could they also contain something not built on this Earth? Critics of the declassified material noted not only what was said, but what wasn't. There were no references to underground facilities, no mention of exotic propulsion systems, no diagrams of unusual materials or aircraft shapes. If such things existed, they remained in layers of secrecy untouched by this release. Some researchers suggested the documents were not a confession, but a test, a way to gauge public reaction. If the public accepted the spy plane narrative without protest, there would be no pressure to go further. And the media's response seemed to support that theory. Most outlets focused on the historical value of the documents, archival photos of sleek black jets, stories about Cold War flight logs. The UFO connection, if mentioned at all, was treated as fringe speculation, unworthy of serious coverage. But outside the mainstream, the UFO community paid close attention. To them, the takeaway wasn't what was acknowledged. It was that something had been withheld for so long. If the government denied Area 51's existence for decades, could their denials about other subjects be trusted? For believers, the 2013 release wasn't closed. It was validation that the narrative is still unfolding. And over a decade later, very little has changed. Official references to Area 51 remain rare. When asked about the base, government spokespeople respond with carefully worded statements, maintaining the line between confirmation and silence. Satellite imagery shows expansion, new hangars, new runways, new structures rising in the desert, but still no explanation. Chapter 12. Unanswered Alien Secrets of Area 51. The base is real. The secrets inside it remain unanswered. The 2013 acknowledgement solved one mystery. Area 51 exists. But the larger question remains untouched. What's happening inside? The base is there. The airspace is restricted. The facilities continue to expand. But the purpose remains classified. And as long as that secrecy holds, speculation thrives. Because beyond the confirmed test flights and reconnaissance records, there is a deeper story, still unanswered. In this final chapter, we return to the core question. After decades of leaks, sightings, whistleblowers, and silence, could alien technology still be hidden inside Area 51? And if so, Will the truth ever be revealed? For years, Groom Lake has stood as the gravitational center of modern UFO history. The question is simple, the implications are not. Does the U.S. government possess extraterrestrial technology? And if it does, is it stored here? The claims are persistent and increasingly specific. Alleged insiders and former contractors speak of disc-shaped craft with no visible engines, no seams, no exhaust ports. Some describe metallic surfaces that ripple when touched, or materials that remain cold yet weigh almost nothing. Others mention transparent panels that turn opaque instantly, control systems without buttons, and power sources that seem to violate known laws of physics. According to these testimonies, such craft are kept under extreme security, in zones accessible only to a classified few. Personnel are monitored constantly. Movement is choreographed. Access is narrow, fragmented. Even senior engineers are only shown pieces of a project, never the whole. Escort teams guide employees through facilities, not just for protection, but to ensure they see only what they're cleared to see. And then, there are the biological claims. Among the most controversial, accounts of recovered bodies stored within the base. Some descriptions are vague, referring only to non-human entities. Others are disturbingly specific, claiming preserved remains, autopsies, and anatomically impossible specimens. A handful of whistleblowers allege that these beings were studied for biology, for differences in neural structure, for reasons the public was never allowed to understand. None of it has ever been proven. No government documents, no verified photographs, no physical evidence confirmed. And yet, the stories are strangely consistent. Witnesses who never knew each other, different decades, different departments, same shapes, same characteristics, same patterns of access and control. Skeptics, meanwhile, remain unmoved. Their argument is straightforward. If such extraordinary things existed, we'd have seen them by now. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That has always been the argument, and to date, no hard evidence has emerged. No verified photographs, no leaked blueprints, no physical samples confirmed to be of non-human origin. Skeptics point to this absence as proof. They argue, if something as monumental as alien technology or biological remains were truly hidden inside Area 51, it would have slipped out by now. A photograph, a whistleblower with the courage to go fully public, some undeniable artifact. But believers offer a different view, that the absence of evidence is not proof of absence, but proof of how well the secrecy works. Area 51 is engineered to prevent leaks. Even maintenance crews are vetted, screened, and escorted. Compartmentalization is absolute. Witnesses see only what they're cleared to see. In that kind of environment, smuggling out anything physical becomes nearly impossible. What remains are fragments, verbal testimonies, easily dismissed, easily discredited, and often met with silence, threats, or erasure. Some researchers also point to a timeline. If alien craft were recovered, say, in the 1940s or 1950s, it's possible that even the most advanced analysts would have needed decades just to understand the basic principles involved. And once Area 51 became too publicly recognized, some believe the most sensitive materials were moved to other, deeper, more remote facilities. In this view, Area 51 may now operate as a decoy, a legacy site, still testing next-generation aircraft, but no longer housing the most extraordinary pieces of the puzzle. Others believe the exact opposite. Because of its notoriety, the base is hiding in plain sight. Its visibility grants it protection. No one expects the real secret to lie in a place so openly obsessed over. But what if it still does? The secrecy also prompts a deeper question. If alien technology exists, why keep it hidden? Some argue disclosure could destabilize global systems, economies, energy sectors, defense pacts. The introduction of stable energy sources or propulsion systems could upend not just science, but society. Other theories focus on national security, that even a small technological edge must remain out of reach for potential adversaries. And then there are the darker theories, that suppressing such knowledge is not about security, but about control. Control of energy, control of innovation, control of direction, of history, and possibly of where humanity goes next. The U.S. government has consistently maintained that nothing extraterrestrial is housed at Area 51. In their 2013 acknowledgement of the base's existence, officials described it only as a Cold War test site, a place where U-2s and A-12s were quietly built, flown, and perfected. There was no mention of alien technology, no response to decades of allegations. For many, that silence was its own kind of statement, because if there was truly nothing to hide, why not say so? Since then, the base has only grown. New construction, new hangars, extended runways, expanded infrastructure visible in commercial satellite images. But without explanation, without acknowledgement, each new addition fuels speculation. Are these the foundations of future military aviation? Or are they sheltering something that still, decades later, defies classification? Even now, the skies above Groom Lake remain active. Observers still report sudden flashes of light, unexplainable motion, and craft that move in ways known aircraft simply do not. Most can be written off, some cannot. And so, the unanswered alien story of Area 51 persists, not because of what we know, but because of that we still can't confirm. The mystery survives because the core questions remain unspoken, unanswered, and unresolved. What is still inside those hangars, and why? After all these years, is it still being kept hidden? Were any of the materials or craft said to be recovered from crash sites ever real? And if they were, where are they now? No one outside the highest levels of classified access can say. Those who might know are bound by non-disclosure agreements that stretch across decades, or by silence they're not willing to break. The few who do speak often offer only fragments, no photos, no documents, no physical proof that can survive scrutiny. What's left is a mosaic of conflicting accounts, partial truths, and questions no one wants to answer. Still, the legend stands. Area 51 exists. Its connection to extraterrestrial technology is unproven, but far from disproven. Every new hangar built, every expansion observed from orbit, every light traced above Groom Lake feeds the possibility from the edges. Whether the truth sits sealed beneath the Nevada desert or has long since been moved to deeper vaults no one's found, It remains beyond confirmation until the gates open, until the locks disengage, until the world is shown what, if anything, was ever hidden. The unanswered alien secrets of Area 51 will remain just that, unanswered. Thank you for staying with us. All the way to the outer edge of secrecy. Maybe we didn't return with proof, but we brought back something else. Questions. What's moving inside those hangars? What flies above Groom Lake when no one's supposed to be watching? And what kind of truth requires this much protection? In the end, the silence may speak louder than any disclosure ever could. When you close your eyes tonight, ask yourself, what's out there? We'll be here listening, even if the government isn't talking. Until next time, rest easy.